Welcome back to the BTR Boxing Podcast Network. This is Shooting the Breeze, and this week we've got a returning guest on from the main event boxing show, Jamie Albrecht. I'm glad to have you back on. I kept you censored for most of the big fight preview for Fury Chisora because we talked about house rules, but this whole Shooting the Breeze mini series, so to speak, that we're doing on the network is all about just kind of saying what you think about what's going on in the sport at the moment and not really holding back too much, to be honest. Like all these other shows we do are quite structured, as you know, and as our listeners know, but this isn't. This is just all about talking about really what is on your mind, and it can go from one random topic to another random topic. And the first two episodes we've done on that Luke is joined in on, it certainly brought some thought provoking conversations out of it, and I'm hoping we'll get exactly the same here. So, welcome back, and the floor
Thank you.
is yours to start with.
Right, well, if you watched last week, my esteemed host there was kind enough to let me in. And all right, let's start with the model of boxing. What's so wrong with boxing and promoters and all shit like that? How do we solve that problem? Well, talking about the Arabs, for want of a better phrase, I'm trying to be. I'll just say I'll say Arabs because everyone. There's all this sports washing going on, sports washing, trying to make themselves look good with sport. Well, the way that they can make boxing look good is all these people putting their money hand in their pocket, buying out every single, the floundering app, the zone, buy out all the fighters, reimburse Blavatnik, who spent a shitload of money on basically what looks to be an app that's going down like a one-legged man doing the okey cokey. Buy out all the fucking contracts, bring it all in house, and then anyone who doesn't want to fight each other, um, tell them to go fuck themselves. You know what I mean? You ain't got a career then, have you? And we won't be getting shit like Derek Chisora and Tyson Fury this weekend. Then we'll be getting quality fights because there'll be what quality control.
Yeah, quality
Let's
control,
have an Arabic Dana White at the top. You know what I mean?
quality control, and damage control. Like you need quality match cards. Quality match cards are the way forward. Like it doesn't matter to me if the guys are 4-5-0 and they're at a very sort of early stage of the career, but what's important to me is that they're being matched properly. And I understand because I understand the background and why we do get prospect versus journeyman. It is all about putting these learning curves into place for some of the
There's
fighters
another
that need it.
subject.
Well, they need it. Some of them need it, but then I also think some of them don't need it. Like some of them that come into the sport with, all this experience. Like, well, no, I'm getting a bit sort of all over the show with it. Like, I'm thinking of like Fabio Wardley, for example, recently, very very limited amateur experience. He's gone 15 fights in now, and he's the British heavyweight
No
champion.
amateur experience.
Do you know
No
what I mean?
amateur experience. This white collar amateur. It's not. It's a step down for unlicensed. There's no amateur experience there. Some fat bloke working in an office can fight against some thin bloke who's done a bit of cardio. Do you know what I mean? It's not even that. So, you know,
So what do you think then about like the quality sort of match cards? Do you think it needs to be completely just 50-50s, or is it
we need
unfeasible
to.
to,
We, that's what we need. Like that's the only bring. Like Americans don't have that. Club fighters are very mediums, a few different shows where they're talking about American club fighters. They come and really try. They're not just there giving them a bit of a run out. You know what I mean? And I think that's the problem. And it builds up a false sense of confidence, so to speak. The guy that's 20 and 0 because he's thinking, oh, beaten 19 journeymen, underdogs bollock. And they're stepped up. What happens? You know what I mean?
do you know who that happened with locally? that happened with Zelfa Barrett. When Zelfa Barrett got to Ronnie Clark, he'd fought about 18, 19 fights when he got to Ronnie Clark, and pretty much all of his prior fights to Ronnie Clark were journeyman. And I personally don't think, this is just my opinion, I don't think he'd had that test, that level of step up, and
Seasoning.
I don't think he'd got through any gears in the fights. And when he come up against somebody who had a number of sort of levels within their game throughout the course of a 12-round fight, he showed him up a little bit in that fight, but it was the
Yeah,
perfect learning curve for him because look where he got to off the back of that loss. Look at the fights he's been involved in. Kiko Martinez and obviously Rakimov quite recently. Very unfortunate in the Rakimov fight. He was doing so well.
I
So
mean,
so to me, Jamie, I don't like to see a fighter being, as they call it, nurtured all the way up to sort of like 15, 20 fights in because they
it's
need
it,
they need to have that level of test, after every few fights for me personally
fucking
before they can.
boring.
It
It's
is
boring as
boring.
well. And to me, I think, yeah, it's sustained small boxing. But, you've done commentary, haven't you, Sean?
I
Much
have.
like I have, right? You try and commentate on a fucking six fight card, journeyman against home fighter. You've got nothing to say. It's not a challenge. It's like, I don't even need to watch. I know what's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? So you're the paying public. What you just pay? You might as well pay to watch a fighter at a heavy bag. They're not really learning much from it. They're just learning to throw their shots. You know what I mean? And if you can't throw a punch, you shouldn't be in a ring. Simple as that. Maybe I'm
Well,
being harsh, but
no, I've commentated on more exciting fights doing white collar charity shows than I have done on actual genuine local shows because
yeah,
it's going to be unpredictable. Whereas, like you just said there, and rightly pointed out, when you get prospect versus journeyman, 6 out of 7 fights on the card, you know exactly what you're going to get. You've got to try and talk your way through these fights. You've got to try and make it appealing to the people listening that
I'm thinking,
you
what the
know
fuck?
exactly. And the people are like, it's a hard job to do. It's a hard job to do because you've got to try and make them shit fights appealing, and them shit
Yeah.
fights are not appealing. That
And I
to
tell
me
you
is
what, if you if,
difficult.
if you are a commentator, you're a fledgling commentator, and you haven't had the experience of commentating on a 50-50, you ain't really going to know what to do. Like, I'll give you an example. Me and Barks, and I don't know if Bobby Rimmel was with us at the time, we commentated on one of the best small hall show fights I've ever seen. Diego Costa against Greg O'Neill, who Ben Ben Whitaker fought in his last fight. Um, and it was a fucking barnstormer. But because I wasn't used to like concentrating and commentating on a competitive fight, I got sucked into the fight itself, and I was like, you listen to me commentary, and I'm just like, whoa, well, I'm not actually giving any analysis. You know what I mean? So I mean, from a spectator's point of view, I mean, it's good, but they're few and far between. Scrap them. You don't need a fighter fucking having 20 no mark fight. I mean, it's vastly different. But look at Lomachenko. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It'd encourage growth of the amateur game um if we got rid of these journeymen because you'd need extensive amateur experience to go in there and do your best at pro level.
But then the argument will be from other people will be like you always hear this cliche saying, journeymen are kind of the backbone of the sport, and I suppose to a degree you can agree with that to a degree, but then obviously on the flip side of it, like the flip side of
Some
it,
journeymen,
some journeymen, yeah, good point, some journeymen, but like when you've watched these guys, they're getting paid a set amount of money to fight this guy, and they don't have to do anything. They just have to literally survive for 4, 6, 8 rounds, however many it's
yeah,
scheduled for,
and
and they get a set fee for it.
yeah, I've no. If you're gonna come and actually fight, um, I ain't got a problem with journeymen like William Warburton. Who was the other fellow who used to box at North Side?
Curtis Gargano.
No, not Curtis Gagano. I like Curtis, but Curtis wasn't. He weren't the best, was he? Bless him. I can't remember his name. Jamie something or other.
Oh, Jamie Quinn.
Yeah, Jamie Quinn. There are certain journeymen, and I keep using quote marks, but who will come and have a fucking row, and they'll make you, they hit you because you've hit them. They'll hit you back, and those are the journeymen we need. You know what I mean? To really test the metal. But people like, and it weren't Christian Lake's fault. Christian Lake could fight as well, but he was just doing as he was told. Um, just backpedal and all that. What is a fighter actually getting from that? They're not having their chin tested. All right, it's just to test the cardio. Do you know what I mean?
But does that's where I think boxing then becomes more about trying to build a certain fighter's brand and trying to build them up and hype them up to the point where the promoter eventually is going to make some good money off this guy because he say has 10 to 15 wins on his record, albeit against opposition that are not really have been testing him. And then what happens then is then they get into a tough fight. They might lose the fight spectacularly, or they might lose on points. That promoter then looks at that fighter and goes, you know what? You ain't shit to me anymore. I'm done with
No,
you.
exactly.
And that's what the problem is with that side of the sport. Is like it's all well and good the promoters building the fighter up to a certain point and then staying with them if they do lose in an acid test fight. But it's what happens more often than not, from my experience since being around the back ends of the sport. Is like you'll get a fighter, you'll get to a certain level, you'll do loads of tickets, you'll do loads of
Nathan
promotionals.
Heaney.
Nathan
Nathan
Heaney,
Heaney.
yeah, perfect example.
He's a lovely bloke, Nathan Heaney. I know someone who knows him personally because I got involved in wheelchair boxing quite a while ago, and his dad, before he passed away, was quite heavily involved in sort of the wheelchair boxing side of things, and he's a lovely fella. But you watch Frank Warren drop him when he loses.
Frank Warren does that anyway. Frank Warren, and Eddie Hearn have both done that to fighters before. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As soon as that sort of value aspect of them as a fighter has kind of gone in their eyes as a promoter, they're on the scrap heap straight away, and then they're having to fight back on the small hall shows to potentially never get another TV show again. So it's that
like
side of it.
racehorses, aren't they?
Yeah, it's that side. Well, they like race horses, greyhound racing. You can kind of make that comparison as well. Like, if something goes wrong with them, it's like you're going to put them out the back and shoot them down. And it's a harsh comparison. It's a harsh comparison to make. I know, I get it, but the
It's
point I'm
relevant though.
it is, and that's what I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is like we're talking about journeymen. We're having this whole conversation about like how certain journeymen are good for the sport, and certain journeymen are not really doing what they need to do for these fighters that are getting found out. Because when these fighters are getting found out, it's the promoters that are then saying, "No, we don't want nothing to do with you anymore." So instead,
Yeah.
we'll just move on to the next person, and it's a
Well,
horrible circle.
does the problem lie with the promoters then? Because if a journeyman does try, they're not fucking used again, are they?
Yeah, there you go.
I've
There's
just gone back on my own point. I contradicted myself a lot in the
a
last show as well, but yeah, again though, we're going back to this, and it's a what's the word? Yeah, it's like a pandemic, really. The problem, the problem ain't the fighters. The problem is the fucking promoters, and that's the problem with boxing. We talk about it a lot on the Main Event Boxing Show. Like and subscribe, everyone. You know what I mean? But we do at the moment. The problem with boxing is right. I don't watch a lot of UFC or mixed martial arts, but what I do know is mixed martial arts is about the fighters. Boxing nowadays is about the promoters. Eddie Hearn sat there looking like fucking. I don't know if you've seen that show with that show White Gold
No,
about
I
the
haven't. No, I haven't. But make a comparison, another comparison that I can think of.
double glazing. Well, no, it's about double glazing salesman. You need to watch it. And there's a geezer in it called Vincent Swan, and he's a fucking spit of Eddie Hearn. He's in love with himself and all that. I suppose the only other person you could sort of compare Hearn to is maybe Del Boy, really.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? But what the point I'm trying to make, and I'm going around the houses, boxing isn't about the fighters anymore. Boxing's about the promoters. It's about fucking views. And it's ironic because we're sat on a boxing podcast now, hopefully garnering views. But we're passionate about the sport and driving it forward. I don't want to see Coogan Cassius sat with Eddie Hearn making excuses, telling lies about Conor Ben, because that's what it is. It's blatant fucking lies. oh, he's innocent until proven guilty. No, he's not. He's guilty until proven innocent. You know what I mean? And the whole news story, it all become about Eddie Hearn and it become about Callis Howland. It wasn't about the fighter. It ceased to become about Chris Eubank. It should have been about Chris Eubank being the fighter. All of that stuff the other week. But we need to get rid of these fucking promoters. Your job as a promoter is to get bums on seats, and then the fighters take over. But Matchroom and all that, they're the people we're seeing on screen all the time, and it's wrong. Sorry for ranting.
No, you don't apologize for running. That's the whole
Pisses me
point.
off.
It's the whole point. Like I'm thinking back to the 90s, like when I first started really consuming boxing as a young lad growing up, and I remember like obviously we didn't have the technology we did now, and we didn't have the outlets we do now, as in for promoters to put their shit out there.
Yeah,
But how much more simpler was it when you didn't have a promoter every single day of the week, or maybe even twice, three times a week on a different outlet saying completely different things, contradicting everything they've just said, or completely barefaced lying about the fact that certain things have happened, or just omitting details, or adding
yeah,
details on. Like, wasn't it such a simpler time when all you'd see from a promoter is maybe at the end of a fight when they'd ask for the opinion of the promoter, was it a good fight? Who's he going to fight next? That was good enough
exactly.
for me. Now it's just like the promoters are way too involved at the forefront. They should be the guys in the background pulling the strings, making things happen financially, making them
Too
bums
much
go on seats.
access.
Yeah,
We've got too
yeah.
much access to them. And whilst that's a good thing, maybe for promotion of the shows, the key word. It's also a bad thing because we're being fed a constant daily diet of bullshit.
But we get
And
we
because these promoters are liars, they're creating the stories and they're on camera all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
no, I
wrong.
do. I do get it. I mean, some people might just completely disagree with what we're saying and say, well, that's just bullshit. If it wasn't for social media, YouTube, everything else that has allowed us to facilitate what we're doing now, it wouldn't have been able to help promote the fighters by the promoters going out there and selling it. Like Eddie Hearn, selling sand to the Arabs. That is a man who could do that
Yeah.
because of who he is and what he says. So it's hard. Do you like it because it helps promote the fights? Is it really promoting the fights, or do you dislike it because actually it's doing more harm than it is doing good?
I don't mind. I wouldn't mind the promoters being on TV so much if they weren't telling so many lies. I've had my fill of Eddie Hearn over the last couple of weeks. And, he's a very divisive character, but someone like Simon Jordan, who's been begging Eddie Hearn to go on Talksport and have a chat with him. And then Eddie Hearn's like, oh, I've been on Talksport. You went on Talksport with fucking Laura Woods, who is your employee at the zone. You know what I mean? You're yellow. You're scared of being asked tough questions. I wouldn't mind seeing Eddie's face on screen if he had a bit more integrity, but he doesn't. He doesn't. And then we have the whole like. And you know what's rich? And I've seen you've mentioned this recently. We've got Eddie Hearn there telling all these lies, and then you've got Frank Warren laughing at him, and then we find out about Zolani Tete. And
Yeah.
apparently Queensbury know nothing about the Zolani Tete debacle, or we know nothing about the drugs test. So that's fucking convenient, isn't it? It's just rotten to the core. Get rid of them all.
Yeah, but then people will say, well, hang on a minute. Well, without them, we wouldn't have what we've got. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, but what have we got? What have we got? We've got a toffee apple with a rotten core because it
Yeah,
looks nice on the outside. You get in the middle of it, like Daniel Dubois not getting paid. He's potential, and you're not going to risk your life against Trevor Bryan, are you? But do you know what I mean? Potentially, like, it's rotten to the fucking core. It's and that's the thing. You used the phrase before. You used the phrase before, Sean. When we used to consume boxing when we were kids, right? The problem is we're still involved with this sport, even when it's wrong and it pisses us off because boxing eventually consumes you.
yeah.
And that's
That
the only
is.
reason sometimes I sit there sometimes and I think, what am I watching this fucking sport for? You know what I mean?
That's when you
It's
get like.
consumed me.
Yeah, well, it has, hasn't it? Like, because we wouldn't be doing this now. We wouldn't be doing this now, and I wouldn't be doing the stuff that I've done previously in all the shows that I do if I wasn't consumed by it. But I like to think like I'm consumed by the elements of it nowadays that I want to be consumed by or I want to
Yeah,
consume. So like we focus a lot on the history of the sport and telling stories that need to be either retold or told in a greater detail. And I love doing that because I think it brings a better light to the sport. It gives people that didn't know certain elements of the sport from yesteryear what these moments and this part of history was like. And then when we do the sport, the history of the sport, me and Johnston find ourselves like actually then detesting what we have now because we think this is just
yeah,
shit. This is bullshit.
yeah.
Like, why can't it be like what it was once like? I agree that a lot of things have changed for the better in some ways, but then the whole principle of what this sport was all about from its inception is completely a million miles away from the principles and the art form of what this sport is all about. And it's
Yep.
people say boxing now is a business. Like that's another saying that pisses people off a lot. Well, boxing's a business. Well, no, it's not a business. It's a sport. But there's too many
Mm.
business elements involved in this sport now, which has made it corrupt.
But
Corrupt of go on.
doesn't the word sport, um, by definition, sort of mean merriment? It means, oh well, we're doing something for sport. We're doing it because like it makes us happy and all that. Well, it's not a sport then, is it? Because boxing makes you fucking miserable most of the time. It chews you up and it spits you out. So no, it's not a sport. It's a business.
It's become more like a metaphorical sausage machine, and the boxers are the
I like
sausages.
that.
They are. They get thrown in like the meat at a butcher's, and they come out like a sausage. And they choose whether the promoters choose whether to throw a bad sausage away or whether to keep it and sell it on the counter on the front. And that's my metaphor of the day is comparing boxers to the sausages from a sausage machine. But I think people kind of get the gist of what I'm trying to say. Is like this is kind of what the business does to people. Like you
Hmm.
said, it does chew them up and it does spit them out. And if you're lucky, you walk away with money, you walk away with your faculties intact, and you get through it. But then there's a hell of a lot of people that don't or don't make it
Yeah,
or
even
don't get through it, and then you don't hear from them, you don't hear about them, or if you do hear about them, it's because they've fallen on hard times, and that's
yeah.
part and parcel of what we're talking about how it's rotten to the core and how people get dropped and get forgotten about or get ridiculed from the sport, whatever it is. There's a lot of things that from the foundations of this sport are rotten, and it's like a plant or a tree that needs to be sort of ripped out from the ground and just started again and start planting them seeds again of what the future can actually bring. And
Hmm.
it needs that, but are we ever going to really get it?
No, not unless well, in this country, not unless the government step in as well. They need to get rid of that fucking British Boxing Board of Control. Robert Smith's due to step down soon, but he'll just go to somebody else. Well, I think he's due to step down. I've seen it in some quarters. He'll just go to one of his pals and all that. You know what I mean? Apparently, us in fans, people like me and you, we don't know what we're on about when we have an opinion. So what the fuck are we doing? You know, and again, I mean, we're labouring the point, but yeah, that's the problem. The British Boxing Board of Control as well in this country aren't fit for purpose. They can't impose fines because they're not well they can't impose like any real sanctions because they're not big enough. They're like a voluntary organisation really. The government needs to step in and ironically our dirty government needs to step in and clean up this sport a little bit. You know what I mean? It's the only
Well,
way we're going to see change.
It, you've just said it right there, isn't it? Like going off tangent from the sport, the government, as we know, is just absolutely messed up at the moment, and it's messing up the country and the way people are having to really struggle. And if that can't be sorted out at that level, then there's no real hope for the sport. But what it does raise is an interesting point when you mention the British Boxing Board of Control. Ian John
Hmm.
Lewis. I mention Ian John Lewis's name because he's a former
Diva.
A-star referee, had some controversial cards, decisions, people. not so not so friendly on him after certain sort of events that have happened in the past 12 months. However, he made the decision to walk away from the British Boxing Board of Control and go to the BIBA, the British and Irish Boxing
Yep.
Authority. Why has he done that? And I'm hearing a lot of rumours that he's done it because there are things that have not been said or maybe can't be said for legal reasons that have happened within the British Boxing Board of Control that apparently he wasn't so struck on, I wasn't so keen on, I wasn't really happy with. And he made that decision to walk away from the British Boxing Board of Control to go to the BIBA, who are like basically completely frowned upon by the British Boxing Board of Control because they are seen as a sort of direct competitor or threat
Compare.
to what the British Boxing Board of Control are doing. So when
Mm.
people like that move away from something they've done for so long, it's like going into a job. It's like being in a job for so long and realizing how corrupt or rotten the employee or the company is that you're working for, and then realizing and then going, actually, you know what, we need to look at what else is out there for us, and we need to see what they can offer.
The thing is with Ian John Lewis, though, I don't think that it was done in completely sort of good faith, if you know what I mean. I think he only left because it's like that kid saying to his mum and dad, "I'm leaving home because you told me off." So he's like, "How dare you? How dare you? Fat Terry!" And like, I should stop using the word fat. I'm quite rotund myself. But that useless twat Terry O'Connor kept his job, and he's even worse than Ian John Lewis. So I reckon Ian John Lewis has gone, well, I use the term fat tail because I listen to Boxing Asylum. That's another podcast, and they mention it all the time. If he's still got his job and he's worse than me, fuck you. I'm going somewhere else.
It's a good point. It is a good point. I
They
just
should,
hear, I hear other things. I hear other things on the grapevine from people, and they're only rumors, of course. They're only rumors. There could be no truth to them. It could be all bullshit. But
mm,
you start to hear a few rumblings about like people moving around in the background of the sport and sort of they're scared to say things at risk of being sued by
yep.
the British Boxing Board of Control, and I get that and I understand that, but then that all that does to me as a person is make me think, what are you covering up? Why don't you want people to
Yeah,
talk about it?
I wouldn't worry about being sued by the British Boxing Board of Control. They couldn't even fight for what was right, like with the Tyson Fury situation, like years ago. And well, no, not Tyson Fury, no, the Conor Ben situation. Do you know what I mean? They just let him relinquish things. It'll be all right. And Conor Ben will have a Australian license soon, or he'll have a Spanish license, and nothing will be done about it. So that's a completely toothless organisation. So I wouldn't worry about
Yeah, well, if Johnston normally on the show, he certainly doesn't hold anything back about his thoughts about certain people and individuals. And
that.
to be
No.
fair, at the end of the day, you've got your own opinion, your own freedom of speech when it comes down to it, and that's the kind of whole point of doing these shows. Really, you got to say
Well,
what you
that's
think.
yeah. I mean, that's the point. I want to make all opinions of my own. So don't be having a go at Sean or slagging him off in the street. If you got a problem with me, come and find me.
I think most of the people that consume this show, Jamie, are people that are very like-minded boxing fans that kind of understand certain elements of the sport, and what we bring is obviously a different opinion and perspective of what we see it as, what we perceive things as, and I think we all kind of. A lot of us do sing from the same hymn sheet when it comes down to certain elements of this sport. And
Definitely.
this whole episode that we've covered, a lot of it sort of started from talking about like building up padded records, journeymen, promoters throwing boxers out in the trash can, the sausage machine, obviously British Boxing Board of Control, drugs testing. There's a lot of topics there to kind of digest and really think about. And for everybody listening to the show, if you've got any thoughts and feelings on any of that, then you know what to do. Just to drop us a comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, drop us a comment below. If you're listening via any of the podcasting apps, then obviously you can leave us a comment on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or even TikTok, because we do put the audiograms on TikTok as well at BTR Boxing Podcast Network. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. It is always great to engage with other like-minded boxing fans because, you know,
Definitely.
Well, whilst you do get people that are genuinely wanting to give a legit opinion, there are some guys out there that will absolutely give you some hilarious takes. So whichever one it may be, I'm open to any of it because it
That's
is
right.
all it's all good fun. It's all good fun, and we enjoy this sport and we love it. And we might moan about it from time to time, or more often than not. But it's because we want to see a change for the better in this sport. Jamie, any final
Yeah.
thoughts before we end this episode of Shooting the Breeze?
No, I just want to. I want to thank you for like letting me loose. Do you know what I mean? And if, and again, I know I keep plugging it, but it's important to me that we continue the debate. So please, come over to our channel as well, Main Event Boxing Show. We run our show between 8 and 9 every Monday night, and you're going to get a lot more from me. Plus, Bobby Rimmer's not backwards in coming forwards either. And Barks keeps us together. He's the glue. You know what I mean? But yeah, we're not shy on our opinions. So if you need to see a bit more of that, then come and join us.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Main Event Boxing Show, find them on YouTube. You'll be able to get all the reactions to everything that goes on over the weekend. And of course, you've got Bobby Rimmer there. And anybody who knows boxing knows Bobby Rimmer and what he's done and what he's been involved in, not just in boxing, but of course, training UFC fighters as well. So it'll be
Yep,
really, really interesting to listen to some of the other perspectives that Barks and Bobby Rimmer have. So if you're listening to this show, you like what we do, you've liked hearing what Jamie's all about, please head over to Main Event Boxing on YouTube and subscribe and watch their shows on a weekly basis. Well, that's
yeah,
it for
thank
our
you.
show. That's it for our show. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for coming on, and a
Thanks, Sean.
big thanks to everybody listening. And you know what to do. You know where to find us. And we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Shooting the Breeze.